So thank you everyone for joining this NATURA webinar. I am not quite sure what number of webinar we're at. I think we might be at like 45 or 46 at this point, which is just crazy to think we've been doing this for about 4+ years now. But today we have with us Paul Bois. Am I saying your last name correctly?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, Paul Bois. And Paul is with Permeasol. And you can take it away, Paul.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tessa. So, hi everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be able to share with you this exciting project that we got here in Strasbourg. And I will start with a thank you, so I'm sure I won't forget them. So, all funding is in institutions, officials, civil servants, and university partners here in Strasbourg. So to get started, we'll have, and here is just a small French collection of all the media infos about how cities are threatened by many changes, be it like floodings, urban heat island effects, or biodiversity that's plummeting. And in the light of this, a certain amount of regulation and action are taken. And here, particularly in France, there is a strong commitment to restrict artificialization. And so there's a regulation aspect to it. So in 2021 and in 2023, there were two laws that were voted and that aim at reducing artificialization. And in Strasbourg here, there is a localized, very small-scale experiment, mesoscale experiment that aims at increase the soil surfaces, high enhanced microclimate zones, and why not feeding zones, and as well as to preserve historical features. And so the questions are, what is the state if ever it is chosen to deseal soil? Are there any monitoring tools that are appropriate for this? And what happens to soil ecosystem services? More precisely, the city actions were around what you see here, what is called now the Green Belt, but that was once a military infrastructure. And this military infrastructure is being thought again here. So you can see they call it the Green Belt now. And they try to think how it can provide services such as a decrease of temperature and higher vegetation and stuff like this. And so there's a steering committee about all this massive project. And one of the main questions is, what if we deseal? Will it ever change something or nothing? And so we get the opportunity to fund a PhD about this topic. And just to let you know, in France, it's around 20,000 to 30,000 hectares artificialized every year. So it is a significant question and problem for French cities. So the PhD candidate, Lisa Lemoller, just started to carry out a literature review. And what she saw is that basically the desealing in the literature is mainly dealt with about planning and management, a few papers on hydrology, hydraulics, or soil physical chemistry, and very scarce papers about the ecology of this desealed soil, and especially biological activity. So actually, there's not much about what happens to soil once desealing is done. And so this is what we aim at with this project. And so the main question is, what is the ecological trajectory of such a soil? And in particular, will it ever regain any ecological functionality? And so in the light of it, are there any permanent or semi-permanent effects of soil sealing? And so we have a lot of hypotheses around this project. And the first one is that, well, we basically outlined three main compartments or three main intricates in the system around soil physical chemistry, biological activity, and plants. And so the hypothesis about physical chemistry is that, of course, fertility of the soil is expected to rise, pollution is expected to lower, permeability is expected to increase a lot, while surface temperature is increased to is expected to lower. About biological activity, actually we have a lot of question marks about functional diversity and microbial diversity, especially, and the question of the number and the activity of microorganisms. We are expecting them to increase, but it's not sure, of course, it's hypothesis. As which would concern plants, we expect higher colonization by plants and an increase in plant number and diversity. And so to test these hypotheses, 3 sites were selected across the city. So this is the green belt here materialized in pink, actually. And so there's the first one. There was a parking lot for a lot of years in the north of the green belt. There's another parking lot in Cronenbourg, and we have a reference site here that's a loan, an urban loan that's been natural for a lot of years, for many years. And so what did we do? Well, basically, let's get started with the caterpillar. So it's just basically tear the asphalt off the ground, and then we have these parking lots. So you have the before on the upper side on the upper picture, and then on the lower picture you see that every part of the red line zone has been removed. The asphalt has been removed. And what do we do on all of this? Well, does Lisa do? She's monitoring a lot of parameters. First, she is sampling soils with the appropriate engine, and we are surveying physical chemistry of the soil, the infiltration capacity regarding water, and surface temperature and hydraulics with a drone that measures both visible and infrared light. And there's also all this soil that is sample is used also to establish catabolic profiles and microbial diversity of the soil. And we are doing also in situ respiration measurements as to see how much CO2 is emitted by the soil. And for the plants, there's a monthly survey of plants followed by morphological features monitoring as well. And for the soil and biological activity, we have 2 samples per year. So one in spring and one in fall. And so far, Lisa started in like a year and a half ago. And so what did we see so far? Some small small sprouts of plants, but that's died soon, but they are coming back and they're now more establishing. About infiltration, we did measure infiltration, and what is striking is that is no clear pattern. And so the asphalt, of course, is impervious, but the sealing effect is variable with sites. And actually, we observe more similarity between similar dates than between sites. So it's not very clear at this point what happens with infiltration. About physical chemistry, what Lisa first did see is that you have all gathered on the left corner all the sealed sites, and on the right and scattered, this is the loan site. And so what we first see is that even the urban loan is heterogeneous by essence. And all the sealed sites display higher pH values. They were drier, they had coarser particle size, and a higher content of carbonated material compared to urban loan. And actually, so the strong differences are mainly between the loan and the sealed sites, not much between the sealed sites. And what she tried to see is if we just remove the urban loan, that's a singularity in these 3 sites, what you can see here is that actually the 2 sites are not that much similar. You have one site that's very clustered around a small group of values, while the other is much more heterogeneous. And so actually there's not much to say except that there is a strong inter and intra variability for as what concerns physical chemistry. About the biological activity in itself, we measure CO2 emissions. So you have here the CO2 in micromole per square meter per second. And what we see is that, of course, on the loan, there is around 2 micromole of CO2 per square meter per second, while the others are really, really not respiring that much. This is what was expected. But the last campaign, the last field session that we carried out like 1 week ago, there was a massive respiration even on the freshly desealed side. So it's really something that's evolving and actually quite fast. Now about the what happens? Yeah, so no CO2 emitted on asphalt and CO2 emitted after desealing, with still a lot higher, much higher contribution of loam compared to desealed soil, freshly desealed soil. About catabolic profile. So what you see here is the difference between, so you have before desealing and after desealing for both sides. And what is called bitume, I'm sorry, it was not translated into English. So what is called bitume is what will remain under asphalt, so the control part of the site. And permeable is what has been desealed. So what we can see is that there is an increase of catabolic profile of potential respiration, whatever the sealing status is, which is quite intriguing. But for Cronenbourg, so on the right side, there is a shift between the sealed and unsealed. So on the right, after 4 months, we can see that there is more tension catabolic activity after the sealing. So we have preliminary conclusions about this work, and it's the first one is that at the initial state, both sites, Cronenbourg and Robertceau, displayed comparable physical chemistry features as compared to the natural site, the urban loam. There is not much about functions such as CO2 respiration or water infiltration, but this is something we were clearly expecting, but we did measure it, and it's really weak or absent. What we saw after 4 to 8 months of desealing is the following things. There is an evolution of infiltration after desealing, but we have too few measure points to be anything assertive. And there seems to be a time and sealing effect on plant diversity. So now, and yeah, microbial growth is much slower, and we did not see much of it for now. And the question can be thought in terms of co-construction and solutions that we may bring or that we may help the city to implement. And so for now, what we can say is that it's really work in progress, and phenomena in soils are not that rapid and that quick. And so monitoring is still on, and we hope that we will see something or nothing after 3 years. But of course, it's something that's not that fast. The second one is that there is a really strong variability, even so between sites and even within one site. And so the strategy that we chose was to use a BASI approach, so like before after control impacts, just because we cannot really compare between sites. And so we did an initial state just to be able to follow the trajectory after the sealing and not necessarily compare between sites. Then the question is, so you saw that we have physical, chemical data, we have biological data, we have plant ecology data, and now we are trying to see how to merge this data to make something that can be helpful for the city and for us to qualify to characterize the ecological status of the soil that's been freshly desealed or not so freshly desealed. There's even the question of, can we switch from this particular singular variables towards ecosystem functions to be more global, to offer a more global view of how the soil is recovering or not, its functionality. And even the city would be keen on using these variables in their daily monitoring of soil status. And so there's a huge work to carry out actually to make all these research quite academic variables something that the city people can grasp and use for their daily monitoring. And to end up with, we have frequent questions from the civil servants and even from ourselves is about the relevance of defining new macro indicators defined when merging and fusing all the data that we survey so far. So with this, I want to thank you once more. And if ever you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Yeah, please speak up or raise your hand if you have any questions. I guess just a preliminary question from me, Paul. Was there any difficulty with finding, I mean, I guess in the US, a lot of our impermeable spaces are privately owned. Was it difficult finding people in your area that were willing to give up their parking lots?
Well, actually, you're right. It's it's a huge challenge in city to find such places in cities. And actually, we only used parking lots that were the property of the city. Otherwise, yeah, it would just have been impossible. So yes, these two sites are property of the city, and even with this, it was quite hard to find two sites that we were sure would be available for 3 years.
Gotcha. Any other questions? I know they must just be burning behind behind Zoom.
I have one, Paul. And just
Yeah.
thinking about when you set this up, some of the frame was about sort of national scale of all of this, basically soil sealing that's happening as the cities are growing or expanding in different parts of France. And I'm sure if you think about that across the European continent, it's pretty incredible to kind of think about the amount of soil sealing. So just wondering what you think the results of this could be used for in terms of influencing policy or planning around this. And I note also that in the lit review, a lot of the work was around the relationship between understanding soil sealing and how that's being taken up or not taken up into planning, and just really starting to shift the conversation a little bit more around soil biodiversity, soil taxa, soil health, in terms of thinking about urban planning or even policy making around, for example, like urban biodiversity conservation or things like that. Where do you see the potential of this research in that space, and maybe just in particular in France?
Well, actually, thank you, Timon, for this question. There's actually this work was, let's say, commanded or was initiated by the city of Strasbourg that really wanted, so the people at the city, the urban planning people, land planning people wanted to know more. And even if it's even a cross request, both from the people working at the cities and the elected people at the head of the city. And so they were asking, okay, we want to do something. We want to be proactive and we want to be, I don't know, maybe leaders in sealing. What can you tell us about what happens in soils once we deseal them? And so, and in France, there are, I think, 3 or 4 examples of soil desealing policies. even in Toulouse, Lyon, but most of the time it's mainly about rainwater, stormwater, and how it does infiltrate or not in cities. Here we're trying to bring a bit more soil biodiversity at the front scene. And I hope that this work will eventually just disseminate or scatter across France, and maybe not across, and why not across Europe. But for now, we're not that many to care about soil biodiversity once the ceiling. And so I hope it will help us to see, and that maybe the answer will be, okay, soil biodiversity is greatly maimed even after the sealing. So don't mistake things. The sealing a soil will never be equivalent to leaving a soil as natural as it can be. So I hope we will be able to bring objective parts of answers about this. And so, yeah, and there's, I think there are many European networks across cities even, and not across academic, that are dealing with the topic. So I hope we can be able to bring contribution to make this a bit more documented. I don't know if it answers your question, Timon.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Paul. Really helpful. And good to just see how you're thinking, but also the leadership of the city there as well.
Any other questions here? If not, Paul, maybe it would be great if you could put your email address in the chat if you're open
Yeah,
to
sure.
sending you follow-up questions in case they come up.
Sure. Just let me. Where's the chat? Okay. Thanks. I will just stop sharing. So yeah, I can. Let's go. Where's the chat?
Mhm.
Oh. So, and I must say that Lisa Lemoller, the PhD candidate, is doing a great job here.
So yeah, if you have any additional questions that come up after we end this webinar, you can just follow up with Paul personally over email. And if it's a really interesting question and a really interesting answer, please feel free to also just post that in our Natura General Slack groups so that we can all see. But thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Paul.
You're welcome. That was a pleasure.
And just one final Natura General note before everyone leaves. I would say the biggest thing right now is that we have our early career fellowship applications that are due on November 11th. So we'll be sending out another advertisement on that pretty soon, sometime this week. So please go ahead and forward that out to your personal network. This will likely be the last round of fellowships that we hold. So I know we've said that before, but this time we really mean it. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
And thanks again, Paul. Great to hear from your recent work. Thanks, Tessa.
Bye.
It was a pleasure. Bye.